Hi, thanks for returning again to IUE Mag TV, where most anything goes. We're your hosts, Adrian Wallace
and Amy Lease. This week's show continues our discussion of the potential war, and indeed, by the time you see this, war with Iraq may have already begun. But even so, there are still many people who have strong feelings, and it is our intent to allow them to have a venue in which to express those feelings.
In our last show, we interviewed Mary Fell and others who were involved with the Poems for Peace event, but we didn't have time to show you much about the poetry itself. And since the response to the event is so strong, and second Poems for Peace reading was performed on campus, so this week we are dedicating this show to the artists, poets, and musicians who are able to eloquently express what many people are feeling.
At the end of our show, we will interview one of the event's organizers and get an inside view of a student who, whether you agree with him or not, is putting democracy into practice, who is helping others to express their views publicly.
So without further ado, let's go back to Whitewater Hall on March 5th and hear what IUE students had to say.
This is called A Hard Rains Are Gonna Fall. Oh, where have you been, my blue-eyed son? Where have you been, my darling young one? I've stumbled on the side of 12 crooked mountains. I've walked and I've crawled on 6 crooked highways. I've stepped in the middle of 7 sad forests. I've been out in front of a dozen dead oceans. I've been 10,000 miles in the mouth of a graveyard. And it's hard, it's hard, it's hard, it's a hard rains are gonna fall. What did you see, my blue-eyed son? What did you see, my darling young one? I saw a newborn baby with wild wolves all around him. I saw a highway of diamonds with nobody on it. I saw a black branch with blood that kept dripping. I saw a room full of men with their hammers a-bleeding. I saw a white ladder all covered with water. Saw 10,000 talkers whose tongues were all broken. I saw guns and sharp swords in the hands of small children. And it's a hard, it's a hard, it's a hard, it's a hard, it's a hard rains are gonna fall. What did you hear, my blue-eyed son? What did you hear, my darling young one? I heard the sound of a thunder, it roared out a warning. Heard the roar of a wave that could drown the whole world. I heard 100 drummers whose hands were blazing. I heard 10,000 whispering and nobody listening. I heard one person starve. I heard many people laughing. I heard the song of the poet who died in the gutter. I heard the sound of a clown who cried in the alley. hard. It's a hard rains are gonna fall. Oh, who did he meet? My blue-eyed son. Who did he meet? My darling young one. I met a young child beside a dead pony. I met a white man who walked a black dog. I met a young woman whose body was burning. I met a young girl who gave me a rainbow. I met one man who was wounded in love. I met another man who was wounded in hatred. And it's a hard, it's a hard, it's a hard, it's a hard, it's a hard rain that's gonna fall. Oh, what'll you do now, my blue-eyed son? Oh, what'll you do now, my darling young one? I'm going back out before the rain starts to fall. I'll walk to the depths of the deepest dark forest, where the people are many and their hands are all empty, where the pellets of poison are flooding their waters, where the home in the valley meets the dark, dirty prison, where hunger is ugly, where souls are forgotten, where the executioner's face is always well hidden, where black is the color and none is the number. And I'll teach it and I'll think it and I'll scream it and I'll breathe it, and I'll stand on the mountain where I can reflect it, and I'll stand on the ocean until I start sinking. But I know my song well before I start singing. And it's a hard, it's a hard, it's a hard, it's a hard rains are gonna fall. Thank you. But this person's particularly special, and particularly special to me. This is a poem by my daughter Veronica, who's written this. She's a 7th grader at Test Middle School. This is called Once Again. Once again, I am frightened. Once again, I am strong. Once again, we are at loss. Once again, we have come together. Once again, we have fallen. Once again, we have gotten up. Once again, we will strive in victory. Once again, people will live. Once again, people will die. Once again, we will relive the fact of the death and blood that has fallen in the sand. Once again, we will hate ourselves for being human.
I'd like to sing a song that my mother sings, and I'm getting over a cold, so my voice is a little hoarse, so bear with me. It's called Strangest Dream. Last night I had the strangest dream I'd ever dreamed before. I dreamed the world had all agreed to put an end to war. I dreamed I saw a mighty room, and the room was filled with women and men, and the papers they were signing said they'd never fight again. When the papers all were signed and 1,000,000 copies made, they all joined hands and gathered round, and grateful prayers were prayed. And the people in the streets below were dancing round and round, and guns and swords and uniforms lay scattered on the ground. Last night I had the strangest dream I'd ever dreamed before. I dreamed the world had all agreed to put an end to war.
It's called Sam Stone. Sam Stone came home to his wife and family after serving in the conflict overseas. And the time that he served had shattered all his nerves and left a little shrapnel in his knee. But morphine eased the pain, and the grass grew round his brain, and eased his mind in the hours that he chose, while his kids ran around wearing other people's clothes. There's a hole in Daddy's arm where all the money goes. Jesus Christ died for nothing, I suppose. Little pictures have big ears, don't stop to count the years. Sweet song where all the money goes. Jesus Christ died for nothing, I suppose. Little pictures have big ears, don't stop to count the years. Sweet songs never last too long on a broken radio. Sam Stone was alone when he popped his last balloon, climbing walls while sitting in a chair. Played his last request while the room smelled just like death, with an overdose hovering in the air. But life had lost its fun, and there was nothing to be done but to trade his house that he bought on the GI Bill for a flag-draped casket on a local hero's hill. There's a hole in Daddy's arm where all the money goes. Jesus Christ died for nothing, I suppose. Little pictures have big ears, don't stop to count the years. Sweet songs never last too long on a broken radio.
We have with us now Phil English. As you guys possibly know, he was one of the major parts of the Poems for Peace. He was the one that sang the wonderful song that we had to listen to at the beginning.
That was a Bob Dylan song, and actually that's actually a pretty good song to describe war. And I want to know, Phil, why did you decide to sing that song? What made you decide to sing that?
Well, this was an event that was going to focus around poetry, and I felt like Bob Dylan is probably one of the only true poets that cross over into the popular music genre from the second half of the last century.
Right.
And you know, one of the great popular poets of our time, you know, with Ginsberg and others from the era, and I thought that that particular song, "A Hard Rain's Gonna Fall," conveyed a lot of sentiment in a very poetic way, and so I thought it would be appropriate to share that.
When was that song written?
1963. That was during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and another time in our history when the American public was extremely nervous about the idea of annihilation.
So another way to tie the song into the whole scenario.
Sure.
What's going on.
Sure. It's just a song about the dread of this impending thing that I often find a hard time finding synonyms for.
Well, you also read a poem written by your 13-year-old daughter. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah, it's a great poem. She's really a talented kid. Not just, I'm not saying that because she's my kid, but she just is a talented kid. She's been writing poetry for a while, and this is a poem called "Once Again," and she's just giving a sort of a perspective from that adolescent world that we, as adults, sometimes need a reminder about. She yesterday was the moratorium on war, and the called for student walkout nationwide, and there were a lot of students, about 2,000 in Chicago, that walked out. And it's a little unusual for a 7th grader to walk out, but I gave her permission to protest in that way because she has such convictions. And so she did walk out yesterday and came to the poetry reading with me and let me share her poem.
And she shares your views also, the same as you?
Well, she has her own views, and many of them mesh very well with mine.
Did you go pick her up from school when she walked out?
No, actually, I just gave her permission. I had things to do in the morning and wasn't able to do that, and so.
Well, other than your daughter, where'd you get the other authors and the poems and stuff for? Where'd you guys gather it all?
Well, a lot of the poems came from the website poetsagainstthewar.org, which is really the father organization or mother organization, however you want to see that, for this effort. And we printed off the chapbook, which is a collection, a short anthology of the very best poems out of the 12,000 poets who registered over the past month and a half or so on that site. And we had some of those poems there for people to read, and some of those did get read yesterday. That yesterday was really a very special day all the way around. There were a lot of protests against the war across the nation yesterday and across the world. It was also special as far as poetsagainstthewar.org was concerned, because yesterday was the day that they presented the U.S. Congress with the largest single-themed anthology ever compiled, period. It was an anthology of poems and statements by the 12,000 plus poets who registered against the war on that site. So it was really, when you look at it in that light, it was being involved with yesterday's activities was a truly historic process.
People in America finally deciding to come together for something.
Well, it was a global effort.
Wow.
It was not a national effort only. The first Poets Against the War reading that we did on the 12th of February was a national effort, about 600 readings at once across the country. And then this was a global effort and was much larger. After the first effort, the registered poets on the website jumped up within like 3 days from 5,600 to 10,000.
How does that make you feel to be a part of something so nationally known, something that everybody's coming together for?
It makes me feel, obviously makes me feel very, very good, because, I have such deep convictions about war in general, and not just this war, but any war. Mm-hmm. Because we tend to think of war in terms of the way that we've been taught to think about war, and we tend to lose sight that war is death and nothing else. We get clouded with terminology like is happening now with these odd terms like collateral damage. Mm-hmm. For instance, that's a term that just fries me. No pun intended. Collateral damage is a term used for the death of civilians. It's a way of dehumanizing death, so that of assuaging that whole awful thing.
Making it more objects than people.
Yeah.
Exactly. And other terms, Patriot Act. Just that's another great one. The terminology that's used tends to obscure the fact that war is about death. It's about killing people. It's about killing people and then dying yourself. Period.
So, there's probably a lot of people out there that feel the same way as you and want to know how they can get involved. Is there anything else you guys are working on that possibly someone could try to get contact with you and help?
The Poets Against the War, I'm not sure what their next step is going to be. I know that they're not accepting poems at the moment on that website. This effort is wound up for the time being there. But if I had to venture a guess, I'd say that something else will be on the horizon with them. And I would encourage anyone to keep, especially if you have a poetic interest, to keep your eye on poetsagainstthewar.org. But right here on IU East Campus, we've started a student group, and it's going to go forward. It's Students Against War, SAW, and we're in the process of trying to get that recognized as a student group. And in the interim, we're going to be working as an unrecognized group anyway. And a lot of the poetry readers that we see on the tape are members of the Students Against War. And a lot of the readers that weren't members before yesterday have decided to become members.
And where do they sign up for that?
Well, they can reach me through my email at pcenglis@indiana.edu, or they can contact the Humanities and Fine Arts Department, actually, and they will contact us.
Okay.
Well, thank you for having me on the show. Appreciate it.
Thank you for
We
having me.
learned a lot about this stuff that's going on. I didn't even know there was a Poems for Peace thing going on until it started happening around campus.
Well, that about wraps up this week's IUE Mag TV.
And as Albert Einstein once said, if you think you have problems with math, you ought to see mine.
Adrian, how does that quote fit into the show?
Well, let's face it, he was one that was smart enough to come from Germany and run from war. Maybe we should decide to change our views and go away from war rather than staying right in the middle of it.
Yeah.
I'm Amy Lees.
And I'm Adrian Wallace.